What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, folks, we've got some absolute fake news being circulated out there in the ether, on the internet, if you will. Check this out. This is coming from ABC, or, fake news ABC, if you will, if you want to call it that. Kristi Noem directed Venezuelans to be sent to El Salvador after federal judge ordered deportation planes turned around, according to the DOJ. This is fascinating. That is absolutely fake news. They are taking two different things and trying to smush them together to create an appearance of impropriety in the government, to give you a narrative instead of giving you the facts here. And we're going to break all this stuff down, folks. Let's get into this. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem directed that hundreds of Venezuelan men who were removed from the U.S. in March be transferred to El Salvador, despite a federal judge ordering deportation planes turn around, according to a new court filing from Trump administration lawyers. Yes, and we've gone over the particulars of this case. So anybody that is familiar with this, you can already spot the narrative that is going on here. They are trying to say, they're trying to make the judgment for the judge himself that, yes, look, the Trump administration absolutely violated the court's orders. But they didn't. And I'll explain why. Of course, if you're familiar with this, you already know. Anybody already knows. The Trump administration is not going to violate any court orders. Now, we already know this, but they're trying to make it appear that that's what they're doing. And ABC is doing every single thing that they can to try to remain factual, but still lie to you. In the filing late Tuesday, the Department of Justice said that DOJ and DHS officials conveyed their legal advice to Noem after U.S. District Judge James Boasberg gave first an oral directive and then a written order that sought to block the deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. Now, as we know, the Alien Enemies Act has been put on hold. But once again, folks, as we know about this case, they implemented the Alien Enemies Act. They quickly rounded up a bunch of Venezuelan gang members and then shipped them out of here. Expeditiously deported these people, threw them onto planes, and sent them to El Salvador, to CICOT, to a prison. Well, while these planes were in the air, and as a matter of fact, as we've come to learn, when you look at the flight logs, you look at everything, they were on final approach, folks. They were 3 minutes from landing, for crying out loud, when these orders came down the pipeline. So by the time they ran to the court, got to Kristi Noem and ran theirself down the chain of command, they had already landed and offloaded all those detainees. There's nothing you can do about it at that. That would void out those orders. But once again, that order pertained to any flights still on the ground. Or we should say, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for his jurisdiction, any planes that were still within the United States. This judge does not have jurisdiction over airplanes that are in international waters. I am sorry, that is not how national law works, International law. That judge does not have any authority whatsoever over any international waters. But that's what he's trying to put out the appearance. And that's what ABC is trying to do here. He's trying to say that because those planes hadn't landed yet, but they're not even telling you this. They never tell you this. They're trying to make you think that they got these orders from the judge, and then Kristi Noem said, deport these people anyway, and then the planes took off. That's always been the narrative from these people, because they want to make you think, once again, Republicans are evil, especially Donald Trump. He's an evil orange man, and Democrats are angels. That's always the narrative, folks. Always the narrative. That's why they will omit facts when it's politically advantageous for Republicans, and they will actually make stuff up to make Democrats look good. It's all insane. After receiving that legal advice, Secretary Noem directed that the AEA detainees who had not been removed from the United States before the court's order could be transferred to the custody of El Salvador, DOJ said on Tuesday. That legal advice was given to Joseph Mazzara, the acting general counsel of DHS, by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and former top DOJ official Emil Bove, who then passed it on to Noem, according to the filing. The filing comes after Judge Boasberg said last week that he is moving forward with his contempt inquiry into whether Trump administration officials violated his March court order. See, those are two totally different things right there. And what they're talking about with the officials, yes, they could, because that was overturned on appeal. They were allowed to deport these certain groups. So she said, go ahead and do this, right? James Boasberg said you can't do this, but they immediately appealed, and that went to the appellate circuit. You see what they're trying to do here? This is all just legal mumbo-jumbo mixed in with corporate press manipulation right here, where they're omitting certain facts to make it sound like the Department of Justice violated court orders. They absolutely didn't, folks. In March, the Trump administration invoked the AEA, an 18th century wartime authority used to remove non-citizens with little to no due process, to deport 2 plane loads of alleged migrant gang members to the CICOT mega prison in El Salvador by arguing that the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua is a hybrid criminal state that is invading the United States. They absolutely were, though. In a March 15th court hearing, Boasberg issued a temporary restraining order and ordered that the planes carrying the detainees be turned around. But Justice Department attorneys said that his oral instructions directing the flights to be returned were defective and the deportations proceeded as planned. That's because they had already landed by the time that they received those orders, folks. Right? When the order went out, once again, if we go back to one of my previous videos, we took the flight logs and everything from that. They took all the timelines, how long it takes to fly to El Salvador. By the time he gave his order, that plane, at the time he gave his order, was on final approach. So once again, by the time that makes it to the DHS, runs up the chain of command to Kristi Noem, and then back down to these people, they had already offloaded all these detainees. There's nothing you can do about it at that point. I am sorry. That is just not how our criminal justice system works. But they are trying to say that that violates court orders when it absolutely doesn't. Any other plane loads of AEA detainees never left the United States. As a matter of fact, most of them are still in detention, as a matter of fact. It's just wild, y'all. On Tuesday, DOJ said the legal advice given to Noem did not violate the court's order, much less constitute contempt. She's right. Specifically, the court's written order did not purport to require the return of detainees who had already been removed, and the earlier oral directive was not a binding injunction, especially after the written order, DOJ said. That is also correct. That is another facet to this whole thing that nobody seems to think about for the most part, right? Like, his oral order is totally different than a written order. Plus, what he said and what he wrote are a little bit different, as a matter of fact. It's all insane, y'all. Once again, that does not pertain to any detainees that had already left the United States. Doesn't matter if they're on a plane, doesn't matter if they're on a boat. If they have left sovereign United States territory, that judge has no jurisdiction over these people. He has zero authority over those people. Boasberg's earlier finding that the Trump administration likely acted in contempt was halted for months after an appeals court issued an emergency stay. While a federal appeals court on Friday declined to reinstate Boasberg's original order, the ruling allows him to move forward with his fact-finding inquiry. Yeah, we covered that the other day, as a matter of fact, and that's all of that. But, I find all this very, very fascinating, y'all, because the corporate press is trying to make stuff up out of thin air here. And Judge Boasberg is trying, like hell, to make sure the Trump administration, trying to find some sort of way that he can find that they were in contempt of his orders. Once again, you run into that authoritative brick wall, if you will, of he has no jurisdiction over planes that had already left. Those planes were long gone, folks. Once again, I've got the video. I would link that video below this one if I could find it, but it was from like 6-8 months ago, and I make a lot of videos, folks, and honestly, I'm not going through all of that because that's a lot to go through. But, it's just an update, and I just wanted to give you guys a quick little update to this. But, this to me just proves outright that the corporate press, they don't even try to hide the fact that they're trying to manipulate everybody on this by omitting certain facts. And it's all intentional, folks, because once again, those facts that I just gave out, those are important to the situation to make you assess what's going on, to give you an opinion of the Trump administration and the courts and what's actually happening with this. If you leave out certain facts, that is going to manipulate the whole story, and it's going to skew your opinion. This is why I can't stand the corporate press, folks, because, you know, they intentionally do these things. And this is the divide in this country. This is what is bifurcating this entire nation. It's people that will listen to the corporate press and just take what they say verbatim as truth and not look beyond the headlines, not look beyond the manipulation. You know, and then you've got these other people that are a little bit skeptical about what the corporate press tells us because they've lied to us a lot in the past. So, you know, we just don't take your word for it. We're going to fact check you. And, you know, and in doing so, since I've started doing this and actually fact-checking the news, come to find out, folks, they almost never tell you the truth. And they never tell you the whole truth. Never. Absolutely never. But I think that's all I got on this one. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. I find, like I said, fascinating it is, don't it? But you guys don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Get the word out there, folks, because it's a really good way to help this channel expand and grow. But the best way is click that join button, sign up, and become a member. You know you want to. You need to. You need to. But anyway, outside of all that, folks, you guys got to remember that, you know, the greatest aspect of being a Christian or anything, is the fact that Jesus died on the cross to save us. That is just amazing. And also the fact that God has a plan for everybody. And I know sometimes I can sound like a broken watch, broken clock, repetitious, but it is what it is, folks. You know, you get new people coming in all the time, and maybe they don't know that Jesus died on the cross to save you. Something you should think about looking into, folks. But that's all I got. You guys try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.